Hi there, can you tell us your name
My name is Herts.
and whereabouts do you live?
I live in Hertfordshire.
And how old are you?
I'm 16.
Can you tell us what a typical day looks like for you at the moment?
Most commonly, I end up waking up about 7 o'clock so I can go to college. I'm at college roughly from around 9 o'clock to 2:15 most days. And then I'll meet one of my parents or one of my family members in town, where I will then travel home, and then I'll just kind of potter around home for a while until dinner or I go to bed.
And what are you studying at college?
Currently I'm in a specialist program called Springboard, which is specialised towards autistic and neurodiverse people. So mostly stuff like interview skills or like education stuff to get you ready to either go into workplace or to move on to a different college.
When did you become aware of your neurodiversity?
I knew I was neurodiverse my entire life, but I officially got diagnosed with a proper neurodiversity when I was 11.
What did that look like?
Well, people used to just call it like Marthering, and they would just say that's just Martha, which is just a common term. So it was kind of like, this might be odd behaviour, but it's normal for this person. So that's mostly how I knew, but there was also signs and stuff like school.
And what sort of signs were there?
I always used to wear ear defenders in school. I would carry them around with me, I would have them on my coat book, and I would just kind of go and collect them. I was completely mute at school. I would be taken out for speech therapy during school lessons as well. And I never actually made any friends at school.
And how were you feeling at that point when you were around 11? How did it make you feel?
It was a very odd thing to go through. I would have been out of school for a couple of years. So it was just a very strange experience to actually go through and go to the doctors and be diagnosed with something. Yeah, when I was diagnosed, I did feel worried that my personality was just because of a diagnosis. And people tend to view, if you have a diagnosis, it's because something's wrong with you. And it's a very difficult link to make, that actually you being yourself is not because you are autistic or you are ADHD. Sometimes you do just wish that when you're diagnosed with something that you can just be like everyone else, you can just kind of be normal. And when you're struggling with a lot of feelings and a lot of experiences that neurotypical people don't tend to have, you just kind of want to be okay with the situation.
Can you give us an understanding of how the neurodiversity affects you day to day as you are now?
Most commonly, I find it doesn't actually affect me that much on a day-to-day. I could be wrong. This could just be because I'm really I'm quite lucky to have quite a safe bubble around me. We tend to eat a lot of the same foods on a day-to-day basis, or I have this very set schedule that I follow. Other people don't necessarily follow it, but I do. Then I'm mute at college, so that's kind of other than that, I don't find it actually affects me that much, but I said it could just be lucky that I'm quite in a nice bubble.
What do you think would happen to you if you weren't in that bubble with an understanding family and kind of a set program that you follow?
I would struggle very much, because then there'd be a lot more to try and digest and go through and process, and I feel like I would struggle a lot more.
What sort of things would you struggle with, do you think?
I would struggle with getting up and actually getting to college, because my mum helps me a lot with that and my dad takes me to college. So I know I'd struggle with that. I would struggle to remember when to eat, that I need to have water, day-to-day tasks like that, which people tend to prompt and remind me of.
Yeah. What sort of things would you find really difficult?
Probably remembering stuff like to eat or to shower. I find that I kind of just forget that they exist, so I need prompting sometimes.
Yeah. And what about social interactions? How do you find those?
Honestly, it depends who they are. I find college very draining because I'm constantly around people, even though I'm not actually communicating with them. I still find just being around them quite draining. But at places like church or at home or with friends, I'm fine.
So it's when you're in comfortable surroundings with people that you know that you're okay. And is that where there's people who understand your diagnosis and they're sympathetic to it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Putting it is kind of like a battery. Mine just drains a lot faster in social situations than other people's would. I know that some people tend to have a much bigger social battery. I just tend to have a quite small one, so it runs out a lot quicker than others, and it takes a while for it to actually recharge and to be okay to go again. Yeah, masking is definitely a difficult thing because it's a very draining experience to go through, because you are literally trying to change who you are to fit into a more palatable experience. You can change yourself to be in the situation better, you can change yourself to interact with a certain person better. It's a very draining experience, and it's not always a choice to do so. And you get very frustrated with yourself if you don't want to. Yeah, some people take years to learn how to unmask themselves.
So, can you explain a little bit what your fears would be if you found yourself in a new environment where people didn't understand your diagnosis?
I would struggle to communicate with people around me a lot more, and I know I'd be very self-conscious about that fact, and the fact that I'm aware that I present very strangely, and I know I look quite odd sometimes. So I'm aware that I know that people would think I was weird or strange, so I'd be very aware of that.
What are the main diagnoses that you've had?
My main ones are probably my autism diagnosis and my generalised anxiety disorder. So those are probably my two main ones, as they tend to affect me the most.
Can you give us an understanding of what can be really overwhelming or difficult for you?
I find that too many people are very overwhelming for me. There tend to be just big crowds, or just certain feelings that are like too much, like it's too hot, or it smells weird. Stuff like that can be very overwhelming.
How about noise? Does noise affect you?
Yes, I find noise very overwhelming, which is why I always have my headphones on hand, because they help to block out some of the noise, which I just find it much easier to cope with.
Yeah. And do those headphones, are you listening to music on those, or are they, what are you listening to?
They are noise cancelling headphones, and then I also listen to music on them.
What sort of music do you like?
I quite like rock, I'll be honest. I like rock and metal. They tend to help with noise cancelling because it's such a heavy bass. But I will be honest, there was quite a few times it'll pop up with musical theatre or pop or 80s disco. It's quite funny. I do tend to get overwhelmed a lot. I get overwhelmed with the feelings within my own body, and I get overwhelmed with things outside of that, and they get mixed up, and I can't always identify what they are, so it can get very overwhelming for like, why am I feeling like this? Different people have different sensory issues. Some people will have problems with like the texture of the chair or the way of the lights, and it can fluctuate from depending who the person is, but different people will have different sensory needs to meet with that, and I think at the end of the day it's just about trying to be considerate of them and trying to make them feel most comfortable within that situation.
So aside from the headphones that you've already mentioned, what other adjustments can be helpful for you?
On my lanyard for college, I have it's like a chew thing that I can chew on, which is quite helpful. I tend to always have something I can fidget with, like my rings. I wear a lot of jewellery because of that fact. And on like my bags and stuff, you'll find these little plushies, which I find quite comforting. But I also play like solitaire on my phone as a way of grounding. So,
what do you like people generally to understand better about neurodiversity?
How much it can fluctuate, probably. The fact that when you talk to someone on one day versus another, you'll find that actually their behaviours can completely change. What sets them off can completely change, their triggers, all of that stuff, they can change on a day-to-day basis. And it's such a wide variety. And also not everyone is neurodiverse. It's not like everyone has a little bit, it's like that you do or you don't. And it's just an odd experience as a whole, but generally it's so fluctuating that I feel like people don't quite understand how much.
How did you first discover or first come to understand that you were gender fluid?
I first learned I was gender fluid when I was 14 because I had a transgender friend, and when I first came out to my mum about it. She helped me understand a little bit better about why and how, kind of. So when we were actually doing research on it, it turns out that neurodiverse brains tend to have a weird hormone imbalance in their brain. And for me that looks like it changing a lot, so it goes up and down, which is what causes my gender fluidity so much, is because the hormones in my brain are fluctuating, and then that controls my gender expression and identity. You do tend to find that, especially recently, or in the past 2 years, that a lot of, past 5 years probably, a lot of teenagers going through things like puberty and trying to figure out who they are within themselves get drawn to things like queer communities or neurodiverse communities, because they're looking for the reason that they're different. And sometimes it is just finding who you are, and it can get confused with a label or a diagnosis.
You've spoken a little bit about the triggers, but can you just run us through sort of what are the main triggers for you?
For me personally, it is stuff like shouting or yelling, I find very triggering, or hostile environments. They are very triggering. Mentions of quite touchy subjects can be quite triggering as well. But I also find that my own brain can set me off into triggers through memories.
Right. Sometimes people talk about neurodiversity superpowers. Can you relate to that, and if so, how?
I do not relate to neurodiversity superpowers in any form, because I don't like the term personally, because I don't see how it's a superpower. Mm-hmm. Because how am I saving the world with the fact that I don't like the texture of peas? I don't understand how that works, to be completely honest. There's nothing wrong with people who do like the term. I just personally don't, because I don't think it's. I don't know, it feels like if it's a superpower, it means there's something very visibly odd about you. It feels like it's drawing more attention to the disorder than is needed if it's your superpower.
Okay.
I just personally don't like the term.
Okay.
I find that my brain tends to be much more logically thinking, and I enjoy things like maths and puzzle games, stuff like that. I find very enjoyable. I like learning. I like psychology, I like learning psychology, but I don't really enjoy being around people, so I can kind of understand where people get those kind of superpowers from, like the term. But
we've heard that you're going to be joining the Youth Advisory Board for Herts Young Homeless. Can you tell us why you've chosen to do that?
I don't see why not. If I can help, I'm happy to help. So, if it can be helpful, I would like to. And I still think this is a topic that needs to be discussed more and needs to be known about more. So if I'm not asked to do that, so be it.
Brilliant. And what do you hope to achieve as part of that Youth Advisory Board?
I just hope I can be helpful in any way of the word. I hope I can offer some insight that might make it easier for other neurodiverse people to access spaces like this. I'm just hoping that I can actually be more helpful.
Thank you.